Hey guys, the footage in the background for this video is the secret jumping puzzle in Caledon Forest. Yeah, that's right, there's not just 4 jumping puzzles, there's 5. One of them's like only half implemented at the moment though. It's a pretty cool area and we get to somewhere pretty unique as well at the end that I haven't seen much footage of on other videos. So, hope you enjoy that. But anyway, yeah, it's Q&A. Enjoy, guys. Hello everybody and welcome to another video. Last week I put out a video basically saying, hey, if you've got questions we can try and do a weekly Q&A. I did get a lot of questions. I haven't read all of them just yet. I've decided for today though to have a look at some of the more thumbed up ones that we can talk about. And yeah, I'm still not sort of promising this will be every week without fail, but there are certainly enough questions to go at least, 3-4 videos. So that's great. If you've got any questions for me therefore guys, please do leave them down below because the more I get, the more likely it is this series can continue. But yeah, so let's get stuck into it. The first question is from Guild Herald, who asked, many times when asked about new features, such as races, weapons, guild halls, and important releases to the player base, ArenaNet simply gives the answer, we're looking into it, or we haven't decided. Do you think ArenaNet is actually working on this content and have kept closed lips about it, or do you think they are somewhat ignoring these suggestions to focus on different affairs? Also, what do you think ArenaNet's major concern relating to content is? I think this is a really interesting question because there are several things we know about the way ArenaNet works, and one main thing that they keep talking about in terms of when they're deciding what needs to go in the game is they've got like something of a list, right? They have loads of ideas, the devs themselves do play the game a lot, and I do think that they do read the forums and they're not completely baseless with what would make this game good. The problem is it's a huge game, right? So you can have a million ideas. I myself have a million ideas about the tiniest little refinements and features to single personal story steps to massive sweeping changes to the dynamic event system and heart system and living story strategy and on and on and on, right? It is such a big game, and I'm someone that is barely involved in World vs. World and only really slightly involved these days in the PvP community. There's so much you can say about the game, so they kind of have a list, right? And they've talked about this quite a lot, particularly at PAX recently. They did a panel where they talked about the way they develop stuff, and there was this mention that they've got all of these ideas go into this big list and given a priority. So if there's something really essential that needs to happen, oh dear, everybody using this skill is kicking everyone from World vs. World anytime someone pops this consumable, then that's like a priority 1 thing, bang, we have that patch in the first day. And then maybe they've got like priority 2 thing, this is just me speculating, but they haven't said exactly how this works, but then I assume maybe they've got priority 2 stuff, which is simple stuff to implement that might have a really big change and will be due for the next 2-week release. A really good example of this actually is, again, there was another like leak out on Reddit the other day from some, I've talked a lot, especially on a podcast I do over on Matt Visual's channel, I've talked a lot about the GVG community and stuff, but there's a little bit more news on this. If you guys don't know, there was a situation recently in World vs. World where a developer, quite a high up developer it sounds like, according to this leak anyway, so don't take any of this as gospel, but there was a developer nonetheless in World vs. World who was sort of shouting at people that were doing GVGs and they were just sort of throwing insults at each other, and then ArenaNet issued an official apology for that on behalf of this dev a while ago, and now there's this person like leaking information saying that basically the next patch, either at Halloween or the patch after that, ArenaNet are going to add a specific area, or they're at least looking into it, adding a specific area in World vs. World as a part of the jumping puzzle in the Eternal Battlegrounds. In fact, they're looking at adding a specific area that's quite hard to get to and is completely separate from the rest of the World vs. World experience, where players can specifically go to have GVGs, and it's like a small quality of life thing that they're doing for that community, I guess, as maybe, so these people are speculating, a sort of an extension to this official apology, as things blew up recently. But anyway, the reason why I talk about this story and throw that in there is because that would then be, that's a higher priority thing. It's right, okay, something's blown up in our faces, we can do this simple thing that is going to have a big impact, so they've got this list. So to go back to your question, why do ArenaNet always answer, we're looking into it or we haven't decided? I think it's probably because that's a massive Hoonin list, right? I think it's really easy for people to agree, oh, Guild Wars 2 needs X, Y, and Z. Guild Wars 2 needs this. Guild Wars 2 would really benefit from this feature, though I, as a player, wouldn't use it that much. There's tons of features that people can generally agree on, but where the waters get muddy is when you start talking about which has to come first and which has to come second, and that kind of stuff is going to shuffle a lot about for them as a company too. So I think when they say we're looking into it, or it's an idea we've had, you know what, it's probably true. It is probably true. Ideas are easy. They come come quickly, they're written down easy. Implementation and what you should prioritize is the real question, and that's really what they're hiding from us. It sounds like a fake kind of PR response. Oh, we're looking into it. Oh, we might do this. Oh, we might do that. And really, it's not an answer to anyone's question. If I say, hey, are we going to get GVGs? And they say, oh, we're looking into it. That doesn't mean anything, especially when that's the answer for everything. What we want to know, ideally, is how soon are GVGs coming? And that's what they're unsure of themselves. The other question, therefore, too, is, at what point on this list do these features start getting developed? And that leads into another interesting area of how they work as a company. Think about the Super Adventure Box. They talked about how Super Adventure Box came to be, and basically developers there seem to have like free time during each week or whatever, maybe after work or at some point, where they're just allowed to spitball and work on their own crazy cool little ideas that eventually might become full-fledged features and be implemented into something. And Super Adventure Box is an example of a feature that came from this. It was just some developers that had this idea, hey, what would happen if we tried to create this bizarre thing within the Guild Wars engine? And eventually they found, oh, we have something really good on our hands. They take it to the higher ups and then they say, right, yeah, we can totally implement this. We'll make it a part of this Living Story update or this Living Story update and so on. So again, that ties back into, well, if they've got free reign to develop what they want, really it might just be coming up to the whims of the developers themselves rather than some almighty list of priorities. I guess the smartest thing for me to say right now is we don't work there. You can't really speculate that far into these kinds of things. You can look at previous statements they've made, and that's what I've tried to just deliver to you here, but it's very difficult to say what they should be doing. Do they have to be completely 100% openly transparent? Because there's the risk that the community is not mature enough for that. And if you look at the way people deliver feedback quite often on places like the official forums, I'd be inclined to say that they're not mature enough for that. If ArenaNet say, yes, we want to add guild halls. Guild halls are priority 3. Priority 3 means X, Y, and Z, so therefore expect it in January. If they say that, it doesn't matter whether they open that paragraph with, this may change, and then they end that paragraph with, this is subject to change. People aren't going to care. And you have to wonder, is your community therefore smart enough when January rolls around to then turn around and say, well, it was priority 3, but now it's gone down to priority 6 because we realised that if we had guild halls, then it's just going to spread people out, and people who would be in Lion's Arch and interacting with one another and experiencing this sociable aspect to an MMO are now not, because they're just hiding off in their own little cliques in their guild halls, which are instances, and we couldn't find a good way to implement them. So instead, we favoured X, Y, or Z. Are people in the community mature enough to appreciate that and just step back and say thank you for the transparency? I think some of us are. I would like to believe I am as well. But if you are a fanatical 14-year-old that is desperate for guild halls and then they don't come, you're going to kick up a stink. And because of the nature of the internet, it doesn't matter that you're a fanatical 14-year-old. There's a lot of people out there who don't fully understand the situation that are just going to think ArenaNet are being the dicks and breaking promises. So I think that's what it really comes down to. It's not unique to Guild Wars 2. It's not unique to ArenaNet. Follow the development of any game, ongoing or pre-release, and it's the same thing. Tiny little indie companies where they don't have massive followings can afford to be incredibly transparent, but at some point companies get to a size, both in terms of the employees they have there and the size of their audience, where it's just not worth that 100% transparency. People will always question you on everything you do, so the buck has to stop with, okay, this is a feature we've thought of. They are at least transparent about things that they're very unlikely to do, and you've got to give them credit for that. Think about when people ask for new professions. Oh, I want a new profession. They've always said, look, we've got this set amount of professions in the game. We spent a long time before launch developing these professions, making sure they covered pretty much every type of fantasy archetype you can imagine, and we really think that that's pretty solid. It's very unlikely there's going to be a new profession. In the very slim chance there is, they have said it may be a heavy armor character because that would balance things out, but no promises there either, right? They've said basically it's something they're not looking into, and there are an awful lot of things like that where I think they do turn around and say, no, that's just not a part of what Guild Wars 2 is meant to be. But there's always two sides to every feature, so I can see why they're being conservative. Anyway, I feel like I've got to rambling point there, but that's my answer to that question. I would love to see the list for myself, but I know I would look at like the second thing on that list and be like, oh, that shouldn't be so high priority, who cares about this? I want the Wizard's Tower back. Speaking of which, that was a beautiful segue. Elijah Villa says, do you think they will open the Wizard's Tower for us in the future? The place really got me interested when I noticed it in-game, and then I saw your video, so I'm dying to see that mystery solved. Jeff Grubb said, while we are regularly going through the world, there are always cool additions which in turn create new stories. Some of them will have translatable signs, and others will be Easter eggs or plans for the future. Is it a plan for the future? Well, again, it ties very heavily into the previous question. We don't know how high the priority is for it. I have a feeling it's quite low priority. I really do. They've got a lot of backstory there and potential stuff they could do with it, as hopefully that video demonstrated. But I would be a little worried that if they wanted to do it anytime soon, they would have this overwhelming temptation to tie it into current living story stuff, and Scarlet would come along. And the reason we go to this tower is because Scarlet has built a base there or something. Do you know what I mean? And I feel like that would undermine all of the previous stuff that they've done to put that intrigue in there. And I feel like a lot of areas of the world suffer from this too. Perhaps a much larger feature, the Dominion of Winds, the Tengu city. Again, it's like, well, a lot of people really want that, but do they add it now? Does that really tie into the Scarlet stuff? And I raised this question before in one of my videos. I wonder what drives them first. Is it a feature people really want and they'll shoehorn the story to fit it, or do they only add features that the story makes sense for at the moment? I find Jeff Grubb's quote here as well, saying, we're regularly going through the world and there are always cool additions which create new stories. Again, it's this idea that they're just making more and more new stories. People that are keeping up with Halloween and what's going on with Halloween for the next patch, they're introducing an entirely new character. It's reasonable to understand that there is this character. Mad King Thorn is likely to have had a son because he had so many wives. You know, that shouldn't be, it's not a massive shock, but it is another example. Oh, instead of looking at how Mad King Thorn maybe interacts with Scarlet Briar, or talking more about the many seals keeping him in his realm, or any of the other things, his interaction with Palawa Joko, King Frozen Wind. Instead of all of this stuff, they have introduced a new son to the story instead. They do have a real tendency to just keep adding more and more and more stuff. It's a philosophy they've had for a long time. They want to make the world wider rather than deeper. And it's perhaps a philosophy like that is stopping us from seeing more exploration into the Wizard's Tower and so forth. Jeff mentions eggs. I actually think if there's one thing they could be doing a lot better in the living story, you know, they've made the decisions, but what could be nice is, yeah, add a living story patch totally to do with Scarlet Briar doing X, Y, or Z anywhere in the world, right? But at the same time, how easy would it be for ArenaNet just to add one small thing, like an extra elemental appears in Garenhof with some slightly different dialogue that gives us a greater insight into that mystery, right? How hard would it be to do that? These are nice Easter eggs that they could be adding. Every single living story patch, they could just be like one other little thing that's added to the game somewhere that people can go out and find. I think that would drive a lot of excitement, and as long as ArenaNet are adding eggs for stories they definitely will be going back to at some point, then it keeps that speculation going, and to an extent the story itself of these areas that we don't have fully dedicated patches for yet. I think that'd be really interesting. I mean, they say there will be Easter eggs. This game doesn't really have any Easter eggs, let's be honest. It's got a couple of meme-ish type stuff with Ceiling Cat, but there aren't many Easter eggs. And no, I don't mean like references either to other pop culture things. I mean real Easter eggs, stuff that hints at future stories that are coming or previous stories, stuff like that. That'd be cool, but we haven't really seen many. Very quick question next that made me smile. 3 Pages Maquantes says, hey WP, well, I was going to ask you about your dog, but then I saw all the really thoughtful questions about Guild Wars 2. Thanks for asking about my dog. I think a while ago I talked about how my dog was getting quite sick. He's alright. He's got arthritis in his back legs, but we gave him medicine recently. We started actually buying proper arthritis medicine. He's a black lab. A lot of black labs get arthritis in their hind legs, and ever since he's been taking it, he's just been slowly getting better and better and better and better. And it's like it got to the point where we have a very big bed, and it was getting to the point where he couldn't get on it, but now he can again. So, you know, it's nice to see little improvements, and thanks for thinking of my dog. Okay, back to Guild Wars 2. One final question from Galidarian Peace, who says, what's your opinion on the way ArenaNet has been handing out lore to players? What lore gems do you think could be brought back to life from Guild Wars 1 to the current installation? This is a good question. I think, and I've been very vocal about this, I think that ArenaNet hand lore out to players in a terrible way. Here's a conversation I had with my guild leader the other day. I said, she was talking about Scarlet Briar, and the idea, again, of Scarlet Briar being a part of the Mad King Thorn patch. She's not particularly into the lore of this universe, okay? But she basically said, oh, what if it turned out there was some history between Scarlet Briar and Mad King Thorn, and that explained why Scarlet was so crazy? And to which I replied, oh, we actually sort of know why she's crazy because they released a story about it. And she said, oh, did they? I had no idea. Why didn't she have any idea, guys? It's because these stories, some of the best bits of lore that ArenaNet are even putting out at the moment, that keep my excitement going in a big way. They only exist on the official website. There needs to be a way to get them in-game somehow. Put them in the libraries. Invent some foolish, half-assed reason in the lore. I don't care, to give us this insight into these players for why these documents exist within Tyria. Please, we really need them in-game, and they need to be available there for players to read. Speaking of which, ArenaNet are actually on a gold mine. If that depresses you guys, that they're writing all of these short stories, that those of us already enthused go off and read. Like, this is the big problem. Okay, I'm going off on so many tangents here, but this is the big problem. The people reading those short stories on the website are people already enthused about the story of Guild Wars 2. Okay, they're people that probably got invested before the game's launch even, because they were told by other people who themselves were already invested in the game. These stories are great, but because you have to go so far out of your way to experience them, they are not helping people on a large level be more interested in Tyria the universe. It's preaching to the choir. These things need to be in game, and they need to be in places where players who've never considered that the story might be anything good because it's an MMO and all MMOs have terrible stories. These short stories need to be in a place where players who are actively logging in every day can actually go for. People that only care about achievements right now. You know, you tell them, all right, you get an achievement if you read all of this short story somehow. I've been a long supporter. You know how all of the explorable areas in Guild Wars 2 have got like points of interest, vistas, this, and this, right? And you know how in Ebonhawk there are loads of excerpts of a pretty hefty tome that teaches you about the history of Ebonhawk, littered all about that town, right? And there's an achievement for it. I think one of the best things ArenaNet could do is for every explorable area in their game, they add a new thing to find in there, like vistas, like points of interest, like waypoints, but they are parts of a large story. And if they'd done that, then they're tying this idea of being enthusiastic about the lore into the regular Guild Wars 2 experience. And players still have that choice, right, do I actually want to read this or not? But it's throwing it in a lot more people's faces. The website isn't good. People don't know that those stories exist, and that's doubly bad when that's the best stuff that's coming out in the game right now. And if that disappoints you guys, okay, so to go back to my earlier point, if that alone already disappoints you guys, it might disappoint you even more to know that they have apparently like hundreds, I think is the number 150 or something, like lore books fully written out, books on lore in the game, on enemies in the game, characters, regions, loads of stuff that could be read and have all been typed out, all the writing's done, all the lore's in place, but the feature of reading books was removed before release. You guys might remember a long time before release, ArenaNet did announce at one point, yes, Guild Wars 2 will have books that you can read in game. And I remember freaking out about that and being like, oh, it's going to be just like the Elder Scrolls and we'll get to be able to read all these books. This is going to be amazing. And then the feature got cut. For whatever reason, the priority list deemed that it wasn't ready and it went down. And ever since then, it's a year now, ever since then, even though they did all of the hard work with the writing, ArenaNet hasn't gone back. They are sitting on a gold mine of this stuff. What's my opinion on the way ArenaNet's been handing out lore to players? I think that they've forgotten about a gold mine that they're sitting on, and it's a real shame that we still haven't seen it. All they have to do is add those books back in, and I wonder whether those books they wrote are the same books we read about on the book carts in like Divinity's Reach, because those book carts have got like the greatest titles and they could be on the most fascinating topics into Tyria's lore and characters we knew from the first game and stuff that happened between the first and the second game and stuff even before the first game. If those are all real books that have been written out, it's such a shame that they don't exist in the game. And they're there, they're waiting to be implemented. I think there's a lot of little stuff like that, you know, you just tie it to a meta achievement. We had something quite similar with the scavenger hunt to find all of Kobaya Mariner's statues and plaques all over the place, right? Exactly the same formula, but just have it so that each plaque is like another section of a book. It would be fantastic, and they just sort of haven't done it. And I have a feeling, again, that's a sort of a very low priority thing for them, and they don't realise how great it could be. Maybe that's just coming from me as a warped opinion of someone who's into the lore, but yeah. To the second part of the question, I guess, what lore gems do I think could be brought back from Guild Wars 1? The best thing for me, this would not be the easiest thing, and I doubt ArenaNet will do it in a million years, but the best thing for me would be the return of traditional quests. I like Walls of Text. I think that the writers had a lot more freedom to make a compelling story when they didn't have to worry about voice actors and keeping everything important that they had to say down to quick little snippets and sound bites that could be read in the equivalent of, like 3 sentences before the player has to interact again. I think they had a lot more freedom, and they've lost that with Guild Wars 2's way of doing, A, the the personal story, B, the heart quests, and C, just the dialogue system itself. The dialogue is always so limited. They only let you read a tiny little soundbite because they don't respect the audience enough to want to read a big wall of text. And you know, there's some real reason for that as well. A lot of people don't like reading big walls of text, but at least it made the story richer for those that wanted to step into it. And now that's just not even an option, right? They've just said, oh, if the majority of people don't want to read large walls of text, then nobody can. And that option isn't there for Guild Wars 2 at all. And it's a shame. So I'd like to see that be revamped at some point too. Anyway, guys, that's the next Q&A for today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope it was enjoyable, and I will see you next week, I guess. Keep the questions coming, and I'll try and pick out some good ones. If you don't want me to talk about so much like lore or weird development stuff like I did here, then you get to guide me with the questions you leave and thumb in the right ones up. So anyway, thanks guys. I'll catch you next time.